So the Switch 2 is about to come out, and if you're looking for super cheap Switch Lites like this Rage Quit one I bought, or need to give yours a facelift to sell, then a new shell is all you need. I'm also going to install Hall Effect joysticks since we're already in there, and drifting is a common issue on these Switches. This was a 3-hour job for me while also managing those cameras, so take your time. This video is just one of many parts of your research before you get started, right? I do like how the Lite is smaller for traveling compared to my OLED, and I don't have to worry about Joy-Cons popping out, but this isn't a review, so feel free to skip around to the parts you're working on and watch it all before you even begin. Before we start, now's a good time to tell you about PCBWay. If you need custom PCBs, CNC machining, or 3D printing, then PCBWay can help you out. They can take any size project, even small projects, and turn your ideas into something that can be shipped to your door. Check them out with a link in the description below. First, let's assess the damage. This was definitely thrown with damage to the left side. The right joystick cap is bubbling, and we have some scratches on the screen, but they aren't terrible. By this point, I've already found out what I'm in for and happy to tell you that I reset it, played Mario Kart, and a physical copy of Metroid Prime on it. In the settings menu, you can test all the buttons, although the screenshot and home buttons still act as normal, but it still verifies it works. Just press home when you're done. So let's turn it off and start replacing the shell. Now that we know our Switch Lite works just fine, let's see what exactly we got for replacement parts. The shell came with new screws, color buttons, the 2 screwdrivers we're going to need, clear card covers, buttons, and shoulder plastics, screen protector cleaner, the shell itself, and finally the screen protector under everything else. The Ghillie Kit Hall Effect joysticks are just drop-in replacements and are exactly what you would expect. To remove the back, there are 4 tri-ring screws and 4 Phillips screws. Once you remove these, it's all Phillips screws from here on out, so you can set that tri-ring screwdriver down. To remove the back piece, you need some sort of pick, as the plastic is snapped together, but with enough gentle force, it should come right off. Be gentle, but again, you're replacing the shell. Just don't damage anything underneath. The RF shield has 4 screws you need to remove and label. You don't want to use the wrong screw for the wrong hole when reassembling. The heat pipe is held on with 3 screws next to the chip. It has just light adhesive up by the fan and should be able to just be pulled away. It's incredibly important you disconnect that battery now. There are reports of ribbon cables shorting and bricking these devices. I had to remove one to access the connection, but lift up on that connection to disconnect the battery before you touch any other cables. The game reader and headphone jack have 7 screws before you can disconnect the ribbon cable and pull it away. Please remember to remove your game like I need to, and label where these screws came from. The fan is next and has 3 screws that are different than the others because they include smooth standoffs, so they should be fairly easy to locate. Once again, disconnect a small ribbon cable to completely remove it. The shoulder buttons have 2 screws on each plastic mount, and remember to save the membrane underneath. The left shoulder button has a ribbon cable for the power and volume buttons that you need to gently remove. Alright, we're on to removing the PCB, and first remove all the ribbon cables you have access to. I forgot the joystick ribbon cables in my example, so do them now, it's just smoother later on. Once all the ribbon cables are disconnected, there's some screws to remove, and you can gently lift and remove both PCBs. If it feels stubborn and doesn't want to come out, do not force it. You may have forgotten a screw, or worse, a ribbon cable, and that kind of damage will end your project right here. The joysticks have 2 screws each, and it's a snug fit to get the stick cap through the shell, but it fits. All the remaining buttons can be removed, but keep the membranes, even if you're using different buttons. We're almost done disassembling. The internal frame just has a few screws and can be lifted away. Again, do not try to force it, And don't try to remove the battery from the frame. You don't need to for this project, and it would just be unnecessary risk. This is the part that everyone is worried about, removing the screen. First, you need to provide heat to soften the glue. I have a heat gun that I'll set to low and use it from a distance so I'm not melting any plastic. At no point should this get hot, just warm. So if it feels hot, then stop and slow down. When you can start loosening the glue, get a pick under the bezel to prevent it from resetting back into position. The idea here is the pick provides a little upward pressure as you warm this up. Eventually, you can use the pick to separate the display from the shell, and at no point should you ever actually pull on this while it's cold. In fact, gravity finished off the work for me. The build should be taken slow enough you're comfortable with each step and starts with the screen and the new front shell. Make sure the notch in the plastic matches where the small ribbon cable will go. It won't sit right if it's flipped over too. The frame in the next step will hold the screen in place, so don't worry about the glue. Double check nothing is pinched. This would be an expensive mistake. Again, verify you're not just pinching cables, but once in place, you can screw it into the case. The left side takes 2 small silver screws and the long silver screw at the top. A lot of remaining mounting holes will be used with the motherboard or RF shield in place. The joysticks are next, and if you saved the gasket, now is the time to install it. Using the tweezers, we can put it in place and put pressure on the tabs where the glue is. Gently push each joystick into its hole, and the right joystick, or left in this orientation, should have the ribbon pointed up on top of the switch. The other side is the same, but the ribbon will be pointed down. Every button is keyed in some way, so they won't sit flush if not placed in the correct spot and orientation. The ABXY buttons have 3 tabs in different locations you should look for. The other buttons are keyed by their shape being square, circle, plus and minus. Don't forget the membranes when the buttons are finally in. The ABXY button membrane is keyed in that the 2 lines in the center should be vertical like a pause icon. We're reinstalling the PCBs now. Make sure you aren't pinching those ribbon cables. Once in place, make sure your speaker is slotted correctly at the bottom of the switch. We'll start with 2 long silver screws on the bottom left of our view. The remaining 3 so far are the long yellow brass looking screws. Once that's complete, reconnect your ribbon cables, including the top power and volume buttons. These shoulder buttons were the most difficult for me, not the most stressful, the most difficult. The spring won't cooperate, so keep an eye on it as you push the spring into position and slide the button down into its position as well. The lower shoulder button will attach with 2 yellow screws. Put the motherboard in place, again verifying no ribbon cables are pinched. Place the fan in position, screw it in with the 3 unique screws for it, which have rounded posts under the head. Then attach the ribbon cable so you don't overheat later. With the motherboard in place, we can do the other shoulder button with the same process. The actual button on the motherboard gave me some issues here, and it took a few attempts. Once in place, screw on the lower shoulder button, and the hardest part is over. Use 3 yellow screws to finish securing the motherboard. Again, you'll see more mounting holes available here, but we still have a heat pipe and RF shield that will need those. All right, now is the time to reconnect all your ribbon cables and the Wi-Fi antenna, then double check all your ribbon cables again. There are reports of ribbon cable shorting and bricking the device, so once you connect the battery, do not touch these ribbon cables again. I had to move one of them to access the battery connection, but I didn't touch any others after that. A few screws on the USB port so you don't break it when plugging it in, and we're onto the heat pipe. If your thermal goop is hard, then you should remove it and reapply new fresh paste, but mine was fairly soft, so I didn't have to. Remember, there are no screws up by the heatsink at the top. Before we test, let's get this RF shield on so we don't touch anything shocking. Just a few small screws, and we can test our buttons and joysticks. In the main menu, there is a joystick calibration, which we will do later, and a method to test your buttons are working. Test everything except the power button, volume. Remember to click your joysticks, and the last two buttons you should use is the screenshot followed by the home button. They aren't actually captured, but you'll see a screenshot notification and then be sent to the home screen verifying they work. Finally, we can close this up now, but we have pieces we need to move on to the back cover. The kit comes with replacement flexible slot covers, but you need to move the black mounting pieces and membranes. I didn't use it, but the kit also comes with replacement intake vents. I actually just forgot. clip on the back panel. Mine didn't stay shut, but once I got a few screws in, it stayed shut. No bulging, felt great. Tri-ring screws on the back, 4 Phillips screws between the top and the bottom. At last, the screen protector, which you need since you can see the blue bezel, doesn't look good on a clear shell. Like any phone screen protector, step 1 is to clean it with a wet wipe. Step 2 is to dry it with a dry wipe. I'm awful at applying the protector, and this was no exception. Once lined up, try to push the bubbles out, and if you have some stubborn bubbles or suck like I do, I've found peeling each corner to release the air works well. The pressure of the remaining protector prevents air bubbles forming while you slowly let it back down. Once you flip it over and test again, make sure this time you calibrate the joysticks because you did replace them.